All right, everybody, welcome back. This is Flatland Relics, where we take old rusty stuff and turn it into something almost drivable. Wait, is that the line? I can't remember the line in the beginning of my videos. I need to write it down. I turn rusty old vehicles into drivable jalopy. Wait. Hold on. Let's start this again. Welcome back. This is Flatland Relics. I'm Matt. This video, we're going to do some patch panels on the big old flat fender Dodge. Looks like we got some kind of add-on that literally looks like somebody tore it out of the fender. I think in my last video, I did my best to hammer and dolly it flat and got it pretty good. And in this video, we're going to add some new sheet metal and get rid of those ugly looking holes. And to do such a task, I'm taking some sheet metal, cutting it down to the appropriate size. You can see that I have a pair of like electric sheet metal shears, or I don't know, nibbler, whatever you want to call it. And I just use that. I cut the patch piece a little too big off my stock piece. But what you can't hear in this video is that the side of the shop was under attack from the yard gremlins. There seems to be more of them than last time. Got these two criminals, the ruined ducks. They are extremely shady, and anytime you go near them, they quack to each other like they're talking about whoever's getting near them. I got myself a little English wheel. I'll be using that here completely unsuccessfully, so I sped this up quite a bit because after running it through two different dies, or two different anvils, whatever you want to call it, I wasn't getting any bend. So I feel like the sheet metal I'm using is way too heavy gauge for this little tabletop English wheel. I mean, I tried my best, but I go to ulterior methods after this, because this is this was just a complete waste of about a half an hour of my life. I don't know if the top anvil moves because it's just not the best constructed English wheel, or if I'm just running too heavy of a gauge to get this thing to actually bend without running it through for 5 hours. I do have plans to eventually get myself a proper English wheel. Seems that it has to be a little bit of an investment. I don't want to just buy the Harbor Freight one. There's actually like a web page on how you can make like 10 adjustments to that or something and actually make the Harbor Freight one usable. But you have to brace it and add a bunch of stuff. I think you have to like add something to the bottom anvil. I can't remember. I read it a long time ago. It seemed like for all the time and energy you put into buying the $300 one, might just be better to just get the one up the next level, you know. But for now, I bought this little one just to practice and get a feel for it, and I basically got nothing out of it because it doesn't bend the metal at all. It did work on some thinner gauge stuff. I was doing some test runs on some 20 gauge, and that seemed to work fine. But I think I'm running like 14 or 16 right here, and yeah, no bueno. So here, I decided another method, and the funny thing is this worked really good within a couple of minutes. I just set one side in the brake of my patch piece, and I just try and match the crown of the fender, you know, or match the curve or the sweep of the fender, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. I'm sure there's a proper word for that. I just try and match that curve with, you know, taking this set of flat vice grips and just putting a little roll to it. You know, it's interesting. Like I said, I spent an hour on the English wheel and nothing, and I spent 10 minutes on the brake and I get the curve I need. Here I'm just cutting down the patch, taking the corners off and making it like a big pill shape or a big oval. I guess from the things I've learned along the way, it's not good to take a patch into a 90-degree corner unless you have to. So I imagine it just, I don't know. I'm not really even sure why. It's just something some people have said that I watch what they do, and they seem to be pretty good at doing patches. So I go back and forth between the shears and the grinder for cutting the corners off. Both of them were kind of difficult. I should just pony up the dough and get a nice throatless shear, and then I could cut these real quick and easy, and probably not distort them as much as I am right now. I'm using a small awl type tool to scribe a line into the fender around the shape of the patch panel. I do take a Sharpie with a decent tip on it and kind of go around that again. And then what I do is I make my cuts to the inside of the Sharpie line. I did pretty good cutting this out. I only had 2 spots where the back of the grinding wheel cut past the line on the side I wasn't looking at. And that's a real thing. You got to be careful of that when you're using the grinder. The blade's X amount of inches wide, you know, for the cutoff wheel. And if you're watching the front, you can lay the back part of that grinding wheel right into where you're cutting and make a big line that you're going to have to weld shut. So it's just easier if you don't do that. You know, be real careful when doing the cutout and real precise. And it'll be easier later on when you're welding. The cutting does take quite some time. In fact, you'll notice this video's sped up a lot because I had, I don't know, over 2 hours worth of footage. I wanted to reduce down to under an hour. So things are kind of moving quick on this one. But it's all sort of basic information if you break it down part by part, you know. Can't let this stuff get overwhelming, otherwise it'll just sit there unfinished. It's just step by step, you know. Make the patch, cut the hole, weld the patch in, then hammer and dolly it for the next 2 days straight to get it back to close to normal. You'll see here I'm running the grinder, but I'm just nicking the burrs off. I'm trying not to like take down the parent material too much. Got to watch that when you're running the grinder. You can really thin out that old metal real quick, which is just going to make it burn right through when you're welding, but it won't burn through your patch. So, because your patch is new and it's the right thickness. So, what I'm doing here, and it's sped up because this is super redundant. If I was to put this in regular speed, it'd be totally pointless. It'd be an hour of me filing a fender. I'm just filing to my line. I got as close as I could with the grinder, and I'm filing to my Sharpie line, getting all the little bumps and lumps out of there and getting everything back to that line, because this patch panel has to fit as tight as you can get it. Look to the right side of the hole right there, and you can see the Sharpie line. You can see that little highlight of material right next to the Sharpie line. I eventually have to take all that back. Like, I have to file that back completely to get the patch piece to fit, because that would be taking the metal back to the line, which, you know, makes it fit. But it's something as much as like less than a 1/16 of metal there can really squeeze the patch piece. And when you're using thinner metal, it's going to distort it right away. This stuff's so heavy that it doesn't really distort it so much. You have to really push it to bend it. So it's a little easier doing this old WM300 sheet metal. And it's kind of why I'm doing this, because this is also, I feel like this is going to be easier for me to learn how to properly patch and TIG and do all that. Heavier gauge metal, I can be a little slower, I can run a little higher heat on the welder, and just kind of learn a little different than if I was doing the car. The car stuff burns right through right away, especially if it's got, you know, a little bit of rust on it, which most of it does. So here you can see my gaps. They're not amazing by any means, but they're pretty good, and they're mostly consistent. There's one area that's a little wider, and, you know, I just had to deal with that. Just wiping everything down with acetone, cleaning up before I get to welding. Do a little tester. I got myself a better TIG welder, fresh bottle of argon. My wife was nice enough to go pick that up for me while I was at work. She's a sweetheart. She puts up with my shit, so. Yeah, only took a couple adjustments to get this dialed into where I wanted it. I was just adjusting the amperage, I don't know. Turning it up, turning it down a little bit. See what works better. And of course, just starting out with tacks sort of spaced out evenly. I mean, they don't have to be like measured, but just kind of bouncing around and doing some tacks, and hammer and dollying those tacks as I go to force the patch piece from tightening too much and getting too close to the parent metal. I want to keep that gap nice and consistent. I really boogered up that tack. It was horrible. So I'm filing it down. There was no point in trying to hammer and dolly it because I missed the seam. Remember earlier when I talked about thinning out the parent metal and burning through it? That's what happened on that tack right there. The old metal for the fender cooked right through before I even got a solid connection to the new metal, the patch piece. So here, my tacks are all done, and I'm going to go around and weld my bead all the way around. That's just me wrestling with the gas hose on the TIG welder. I like to have a little extra hanging between my body and my arm. That way it's never leaning. There's no pressure on the TIG handle. You know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense or not, but I like to have the TIG handle sort of just like no resistance against my hand. That way it's easy to maneuver. And yeah, I'm just working my way through, working past all my tacks and bouncing around a little bit here, trying not to distort it too much with the heat, but I kind of lose control of that after a little bit. End up having to correct all that after I get the weld ground down. when you accidentally stick your filler rod to the panel, just let it cool and then hit it again and pull it off. Don't ask me how I know that. I can definitely say I felt more comfortable using the TIG welder. I had gotten some ER70, I think, rods from Yes Welder, and they're the only ones I've ever used besides the horrible ones they sell at Harbor Freight, which they're not usable. Do yourself a favor if you're trying to do this. Get some decent filler rods. If you go on the like I went on to the site at Yes Welder, and Eastwood has the same stuff. Anybody who sells stuff for TIG has a variety of filler rod, and you can just look up which ones work best for sheet metal, for automotive, and just order them. Don't try and be fancy. Just get the ones that people recommend. And that's what I did. I think it's ER70. I can't remember. It might be ER67. I can't remember the number off the top of my head. And yeah, for the price, it's a good value. They fuse together really good. Get a controllable puddle. I'm like a novice TIG welder, and I seem to do pretty good on this patch. Here, I'm just running the flap disc. I think it's an 80 grit. I'm knocking down that weld bead. Like I said, I'm a novice. My weld bead is not very clean. It's a little boogery, but I feel like it's pretty solid. I did get a nice amount of, I don't know what you call it. The weld went all the way through in a lot of the seam. So for this heavy gauge metal, I feel like that's really good. When I flipped it over, I was able to see that I was getting good penetration, good weld penetration through most of the patch. Probably get better the next time I try it, But yeah, here I try not to hit the patch metal or the parent metal too much, and try not to thin those out. I'm just trying to knock down my weld bead, which it had, like I said, it was a little boogery, so had to work with it and just kind of take my time and get it back down the flat. Here I'm just fixing a couple little spots that I missed. I noticed some holes that I missed, so I went back and got them. One of the things I was definitely working on while I was doing my continuous weld with this patch piece was to try and drag the puddle of filler rod and just hit the filler rod when it looked like I needed to add a little bit to the puddle. That was the first time I was really able to kind of see that and work with that. And that's another thing where I'm sure like the more I practice, the better and easier it will be. It's something you got to do a few times. This is probably only like the third or fourth time I've ever TIG welded at all. And the first couple times I had horrible equipment. I was just using base level stuff, like total beginner stuff. And the difference with this better filler rod is night and day. Another little detail to this whole puzzle that I really need to start doing is wearing gloves when I weld. Not because I burn my hands, but because my fingers stink when I'm done. They smell for like over a day, and it's not the best smell. Like I can smell them. I can smell the gas and the burnt and everything because they're right next to, they're right next to the weld area, and it's not a pleasant smell. Got to get myself some gloves because I'm not going to wear like heavy duty welding gloves. I have a couple sets of those. They're overkill for what I'm doing, but I need to do something just to keep the gas off my hands. Here you can see the heat distortion is a quality 1/4 of an inch. Yeah, there's none. Up top, there's about a 1/4 inch. So that was pretty crazy. I knew I had distorted the panel, but I didn't think it was that bad. This is a large, flat area of sheet metal, and you just have to hammer and dolly it and work it back to straight once you're done. I mean, I probably could have took longer to do the weld and bounced around a little more and did little shorter beads and all that. I don't know. I felt like I would be able to hammer and dolly it back, and that's what you're going to see me doing next. Right now, I'm just cleaning up the back of the weld. That way it's flat when I use the dolly, and if I'm checking it with my hand, I don't cut my hand. So yeah, break out the sledge and start shrinking everything back. And just like the other video, I use a combination of one of my semi-flat dollies, and I use an 11-ounce body hammer, and then I use that sledge as like a 2 or 3 pound sledge. That thing's great. I mean, you want to knock some shape into something heavy, that thing works really good. far as the hammer and dolly work that I do, I use my workbench as like a flat dolly. And it works good with this fender because it's flat. If I was doing something for the car, it probably wouldn't work because everything's all double compound curves and, you know, all these big sweeping lines and stuff. But with this fender, I mean, it's flat. So here I'm doing a little more of a detailed spot and trying to shrink it a little bit and get it to come up to the ruler that I'm using as a straight edge. But when I flip it over and hit it with the sledge, I'm just using the workbench as the dolly, and it works really well. The steel is thick enough. It makes the same sound as when I use the dolly in my hand, so I know it's doing the right thing. There's plenty of videos on how to do hammer and dolly work. I've been kind of studying that for months and just watching videos here and there and reading a little bit about it and just getting an idea for it. And I've experimented a few times with that here and there. And I don't know, on this fender, it sort of all clicked and made sense. And I've been able to get my weld distortion back to an acceptable level. I was able to take the big crinkle out of the front corner of that fender from where it obviously like hit a tree pretty good. I mean, is it perfect? No. Is it 90 times better than it was before I started? Yes, absolutely. Like that to me is an acceptable level. I don't own a planishing hammer, so I do it all by hand. And that's pretty good. I mean, dude, you saw the distortion earlier. There was a solid 1/4 inch gap from the ruler to the fender. And it's flat there. So there's no camera cuts. There's no funny business. That's just the work getting done. To end this, I just sand it a little bit and make it look nice. And then I put a little bit of oil on top of it because it's going to sit as bare metal in my shop, and my shop's not exactly climate controlled. So that's it for this week's video. Have a good one. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.